What if I told you that in Texas, your vote might literally count less depending on what color you are? And I don't mean metaphorically like black votes don't feel like they matter. I mean legally engineered, mathematically diluted on purpose. Right now, Texas Republicans have redrawn district lines so aggressively that the average black voter's ballot is worth about 1/5 the weight of a white voter's. 1/5. Like the Constitution's greatest hits album is still on repeat. This is democracy on clearance. And the price tag says black voices 80% off. So how did we get here? Time to talk gerrymandering, a political scam that's older than electricity. At its core, gerrymandering is when politicians decide, instead of voters choosing their leaders, why don't leaders just choose their voters? They grab a map, a pen, and their most evil laugh. They have two big tricks that they like to use. The first one is called packing, which is when you shove black and brown voters into one district so their power can't spread. The second one is called cracking, which is when you slice up black neighborhoods into tiny pieces so they can't form a majority anywhere. And the wild part, this is all legal. America banned literacy tests, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, but apparently political scribble is still fine art. Nowhere is this more obvious than Texas. Texas just gained 2 new congressional seats after the 2020 census, all because of explosive population growth. And guess what? 95% of that growth came from Black, Latino, and Asian communities. So naturally, you'd expect the new maps to reflect that diversity, right? Wrong. Instead, the new maps actually reduce the number of districts where communities of color can elect a candidate of their choice. That's not an accident. That's not, oops, we slipped with the pen. That's a very deliberate strategy. Imagine if LeBron dropped 40 points, 15 rebounds, and 12 assists, but when they updated the scoreboard, they gave all the points to Kyle Korver. That's Texas politics right now. The name gerrymandering goes back to 1812 when Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry approved a district so twisted it looked like a salamander. So the newspaper clowned him gerrymander. Boom, political slander turned vocabulary word. But the practice goes back way further, all the way to colonial assemblies decided who counted as a real voter. Spoiler alert, it was never black people. And after the Civil War, gerrymandering became a surgical weapon. Once Reconstruction ended, white politicians in the South figured out they could redraw maps to keep black voters technically enfranchised, but practically powerless. They didn't need to burn ballot boxes if they could just rearrange the lines. Texas in particular has been sued over racial gerrymandering basically every decade since the Voting Rights Acts of 1965. And we're preparing to sue them again. And every time they're like the kid who keeps getting caught cheating on the test but insists, okay, but this time I'm not cheating. And then you flip the paper over and the whole answer sheet is written on the back. So yes, guys, Republicans are actually children. I know you've been dying to know because it sure seems like it. Now, some folks hear all this and say, well, isn't this just how politics works? Both sides do it. Sure, Democrats gerrymander too, not to the degree or breadth of Republicans, but here's the difference anyway. In Texas, it's about more than party, it's about race. Republicans have literally admitted under oath that they would have drawn the maps different if Black and Latino voters had voted Republican instead of Democrat. Translation, they don't mind your melanin if you're voting red, but if you're voting blue, suddenly your whole neighborhood gets chopped up and your voting power diluted. That is active voter suppression and completely against the Constitution and a lot of specific laws probably. The biggest problem here is that laws are really only made to enforce on black people. So how in the world do you enforce it on a white majority who have never really had to face consequences for their wrongdoings in the first place? Quite literally, the whole MAGA thing is about not taking accountability and blaming others, outsiders, for your problems, as if any minority group could negatively affect America as much as its majority. But I digress. When your vote counts less, your school gets less funding, your hospitals get less representation, your roads don't get fixed. And when it's time for disaster relief or climate policy or criminal justice reform, guess whose communities get left off the list? The folks with a lack of representation. In 2019, the Supreme Court basically said, yeah, gerrymandering is ugly, but not our business. But grassroots groups in Texas are fighting back. They're suing, organizing, and educating voters on how to spot suppression when they see it. And long term, this only works if people don't notice. The moment enough folks start asking, wait, why is my district shaped like a spaghetti noodle? The game starts to crack. So when we say Texas Republicans just made a black vote worth 1/5 of a white vote, that is systematic racism. Lines on a map built to keep power in one set of hands, but every line is just ink. And ink can be rewritten. This is the Adonis Black Show, the only show where we laugh to keep from crying and apparently from drawing too. I'll see you next video.